The girl was already blue when I found her. I had taken the trash out through the back door of the diner, the same way I had done every closing shift for the past 11 months. The alley smelled like grease and rain and the particular rot that collected behind restaurants no matter how often you cleaned. My shoes stuck to the wet pavement as I hauled the bag toward the dumpster, and that is when I saw the shape against the wall. At first, I thought it was a pile of clothes someone had dumped. People did that sometimes, left things they no longer wanted in places they thought no one would notice. But then the pile moved just slightly, a tremor that could have been the wind, but was not. I dropped the trash bag. She was small, maybe 5 or 6 years old, with dark hair plastered to her face and a coat that looked expensive but was soaked through. Her lips had that particular shade of purple that meant her body was shutting down. Her eyes were closed, and her breathing was so shallow I had to put my hand near her mouth to confirm she was still alive. I did not scream. I did not call for help. I had learned long ago that screaming only made things worse, that help rarely came when you called for it, and that the only person you could rely on was yourself. I pulled off my jacket and wrapped it around her, then lifted her into my arms. She weighed almost nothing. Her skin was ice, and when I pressed my fingers to her throat, her pulse was a faint thread that kept slipping away from me. The diner was closed. My co-workers had left an hour ago. My phone was inside, and I was not going to waste time going back for it when this child was dying in my arms. I ran. The hospital was 6 blocks away. I knew because I had walked past it every day for almost a year, had noted its location the way I noted the location of everything in this city. Exits, entrances, places to hide, places to run. I had mapped this neighborhood in my mind the same way I had mapped every neighborhood I had ever lived in, because knowing your terrain was the difference between survival and disappearance. The rain started again when I was 3 blocks from the emergency room. The girl did not wake, did not stir, did not show any sign that she knew I was carrying her. I held her tighter and ran faster, my lungs burning, my legs aching, my heart pounding a rhythm that said, "Hurry, hurry, hurry." The automatic doors of the emergency room slid open and I stumbled inside, water dripping from my hair, my clothes soaked, a dying child in my arms. The nurse at the front desk looked up. I said, "She's hypothermic. I found her in an alley. She's been out there for hours. She needs warming, she needs fluids, she needs help right now." The nurse did not ask questions. She pressed a button and within seconds there were people around me, taking the girl from my arms, laying her on a stretcher, wheeling her away through doors that said, "Authorized personnel only." Someone handed me a clipboard. Someone else asked me questions I could not answer. What is her name? I do not know. Where are her parents? I do not know. What happened to her? I do not know. I found her. That is all I know. They let me sit in the waiting room. The chairs were plastic and uncomfortable, and the fluorescent lights made everyone look sick. I sat there with my wet clothes and my empty arms and my heart still racing, waiting for someone to tell me if the girl was going to live. An hour passed, then 2. The waiting room emptied and filled again with new faces, new tragedies, new people waiting for news they were afraid to hear. A doctor came out through those authorized doors. She looked tired in the way that doctors always look tired, like she had seen too much to ever really rest again. She scanned the room and her eyes found me. "You brought in the little girl." I stood. "Is she alive?" "She's stable. You got her here just in time. Another 20 minutes and we would have lost her." The doctor paused. "Do you know who she is? We found a phone in her pocket, but it's locked. We can't reach her family." I shook my head. "I don't know her. I just found her." The doctor nodded, then looked at me more closely. "You should get checked out too. You're soaked, and you've been sitting there shivering for 2 hours." I was shivering. I had not noticed. "I'm fine. At least let us give you some dry clothes. We have donations." I almost said no. I almost walked out of that hospital and disappeared into the night the way I had disappeared so many times before. But I was cold, and my clothes were wet, and the girl was alive because of me. And for one moment, I let myself accept help. The nurse who brought me the clothes also brought me a cup of coffee. It was bitter and too hot, but I drank it anyway. The clothes were not my size, a pair of sweatpants and a hoodie that hung loose on my frame, but they were dry and warm, and that was enough. I was changing in the bathroom when I heard the commotion. Raised voices, footsteps, the particular sound of authority arriving, the kind of sound that made people step back and make room. I pressed my ear to the bathroom door and listened. Where is she? A man's voice, low and controlled, but with an edge that suggested the control was costing him something. Where is my daughter? The nurse's response was muffled. Then a different voice, sharper. We need to see her now. Not in 5 minutes. Now. More footsteps. The sound of doors being pushed open without permission. A woman protesting, then going silent mid-sentence as if someone had simply looked at her and she had decided speaking was no longer worth the risk. His daughter. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. I was nobody. A waitress at a diner that served coffee to truckers and insomnia patients. A woman who had spent the last 3 years running from a past that refused to stay buried. I had no identification, no permanent address, no ties to anyone or anything. I was invisible, and I had worked hard to stay that way. If I walked out there now, if I let them see me, if I let them thank me, I would become visible. Someone would ask my name. Someone would want to know where I lived, where I worked, how to contact me. Someone would remember my face. I could not afford to be remembered. I opened the bathroom door slowly and looked out. The hallway was chaos. Men in suits, men with earpieces, men who stood like they were ready to kill or die on command. And at the center of it all, a man with dark hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from something harder than stone. He was tall, broad-shouldered. He wore a coat that probably cost more than I made in a year. And he moved through that hospital like he owned it. Maybe he did. People stepped out of his way without being asked. Nurses who had been confident and capable moments earlier now looked nervous, deferential, small. A doctor approached him with a clipboard. The man did not take it. He simply looked at the doctor, and the doctor's hands began to tremble. "She's stable," the doctor said, his voice cracking slightly. "The woman who brought her in, she saved your daughter's life. Another 20 minutes. Where is she? The woman. She was in the waiting room, but find her." 2 words, spoken quietly, but the doctor flinched as if he had been struck, and 3 of the men in suits immediately broke away and began moving through the hospital with purpose. I had seen men like him before. I had grown up around men like him. I knew what that kind of power looked like, what it felt like, how it could crush everything in its path without even noticing. I slipped out of the bathroom and walked the other way. The exit was at the end of the hallway. I kept my head down and my pace steady, just another person in donated clothes, walking through a hospital at 3 in the morning. No one noticed me. No one stopped me. I pushed through the doors and stepped out, into the rain. I did not look back. My apartment was a single room above a laundromat. The entrance was through a side door that most people did not know existed, and the landlord accepted cash and did not ask for identification. It was not much, but it was mine, and more importantly, it was invisible. I climbed the stairs and unlocked my door and stood in the darkness for a long time, dripping water onto the floor I had scrubbed clean just that morning. The girl was alive. That was what mattered. She had a father who had come for her, a father with power and resources and men who would kill for him. She would be taken care of. She would be safe. She did not need me. I peeled off the wet, donated clothes and hung them over the radiator to dry. I took a hot shower that lasted until the water turned cold, and then I crawled into bed and stared at the ceiling until morning came. I did not sleep. The diner opened at 6. I was there at 5:30 making coffee and wiping down tables and doing all the things I did every day. My manager asked why I looked tired. I told her I had not slept well. She nodded and did not ask anything else. The breakfast rush came and went. I took orders and poured coffee and smiled at customers who never really looked at me. I was good at my job. I was efficient and polite and forgettable, which was exactly what I needed to be. Around 10, a man came in. He was not one of the suited men from the hospital, but he had the same quality about him, the same watchfulness, the same way of scanning a room before he sat down. He chose a booth in the corner where he could see both exits, and when I approached with my notepad, he looked at me the way a hunter looks at tracks in the snow. "Just coffee," he said. I brought him his coffee. He did not drink it. He sat there for 2 hours pretending to read a newspaper, and when I refilled his cup for the third time, he said, "Late shift last night?" I kept my expression neutral. "Early shift this morning." He nodded. His eyes never left my face. "Must be hard. Working these hours?" "I manage." I walked away before he could say anything else. I could feel him watching me for the rest of my shift, could feel his gaze on the back of my neck like a physical weight. When he finally left, he paid with cash and tipped 50%. His receipt had a phone number written on it. I threw the receipt away, but I kept the 50%. 3 days later, the diner closed. It happened without warning. The owner called an emergency meeting at the end of my shift, his face pale and his hands shaking. He said something about debts and bad investments, but his eyes kept darting to the window, to the black car that had been parked across the street all morning. I knew what had happened. I had seen the men who came in the day before, the men in expensive suits who did not order anything but sat in a booth for 3 hours. I had seen the owner's face when he talked to them, the way the blood had drained from his cheeks, the way he had nodded and nodded and nodded until they finally stood up and left. Someone had bought the diner. Someone had bought it and closed it and put everyone out of work, and I knew exactly who that someone was. The smart thing would have been to run. Pack my bag, empty my savings, disappear to another city, and start over the way I had done so many times before. I had gotten too comfortable here, stayed too long, allowed myself to believe that invisibility was the same as safety. But running cost money, and I had just lost my job. I spent 2 weeks looking for work. I applied to restaurants and hotels and cleaning services. I went to interviews where the managers looked at my blank resume and my lack of references and told me they would be in touch. They never were. I was running out of money when I found the listing, a cleaning company that contracted with office buildings downtown. The pay was low and the hours were bad, but they were hiring immediately and they did not ask many questions. I started on a Monday. The building was one of those glass towers that dominated the skyline, the kind of place where important people made important decisions. I was assigned to floors 40 through 45, and my shift was from midnight to 8 in the morning. I did not mind the night shift. The building was quiet at those hours, empty except for the occasional workaholic and the security guards who patrolled the lobbies. I could work in peace, alone with my thoughts and the rhythm of mopping and dusting and scrubbing. The first few weeks were uneventful. I learned the building the way I learned every place I lived. The exits, the stairwells, the elevators that required key cards, and the ones that did not. I learned which floors were always empty and which ones had people working late. I learned the names of the security guards and the schedules of the other cleaners. I learned that floors 43 through 45 belonged to a single company. No name on the directory, no logo on the door, just sweet numbers and silence and the kind of emptiness that suggested the real business happened elsewhere. I cleaned those floors without curiosity. I emptied trash cans and wiped down surfaces and vacuumed carpets that showed no sign of foot traffic. It was not my place to ask questions. It was my place to be invisible. It was a Thursday night, nearly 4 months after I had pulled a dying girl out of an alley when the elevator chimed. I was on the 44th floor, cleaning an office that belonged to someone important enough to have windows on 3 sides. The desk was massive, the chairs were leather, and there was not a single personal item anywhere. No photographs, no plants, nothing that suggested a human being spent time here. I had just finished vacuuming when I heard the doors open. Footsteps. Male. Unhurried. Coming closer. I turned off the vacuum and stood very still. It was 3 in the morning. No, one should have been here. The door to the office opened and he walked in. I recognized him immediately. The same dark hair, the same carved face, the same coat, or maybe a different coat that looked exactly the same. He moved into the room like he owned it, because he did own it. And when his eyes found me, he stopped. For a long moment neither of us spoke. I stood there with the vacuum cord in my hand, my heart pounding against my ribs, my mind calculating distances and exits and the probability of escape. He stood in the doorway, blocking my only path out, his eyes fixed on my face with an intensity that made the hair on my arms stand up. Then he said, "You." One word, just one word. But it carried the weight of months of searching, of investigators and surveillance and dead ends. It carried the weight of a father who had almost lost everything and had never stopped looking for the woman who had given it back. I said nothing. He stepped into the office and closed the door behind him. The click of the latch was very loud in the silence. "I've been looking for you," he said. His voice was exactly as I remembered it from the hospital. Low, controlled, dangerous. "For 4 months? I've had people searching every corner of this city. And you were here the whole time, scrubbing my floors." I still said nothing. There was nothing to say. He had found me, and running was no longer an option. I could only wait and see what happened next. He took another step closer. His eyes moved over my face, cataloguing features, committing them to memory. "You saved my daughter's life." It was not a question, so I did not answer it. "She almost died." Another step. "The doctor said another 20 minutes and she would have been gone. But you found her. You carried her through the rain. You stayed until you knew she was safe." He paused. "And then you disappeared like smoke." I found my voice. It came out steady, which surprised me. There was nothing to stay for. Something shifted in his expression, not softness. He did not look like a man who knew what softness was, but something like curiosity, interest, the way a predator looks at prey that does something unexpected. "Nothing to stay for," he repeated. "I would have given you anything. Money, a house, a new identity, anything you wanted. And you walked away." "I don't want anything from you." He studied me for a long moment. His gaze was clinical, assessing, the gaze of a man who had spent a lifetime reading people and using what he learned. I forced myself to hold still, to give him nothing. "What's your name?" he said. I considered lying. I had worn so many names over the past 3 years that my real one felt like a stranger. But something about the way he looked at me, the way he waited, made me tell the truth. "Adaze." He nodded slowly, like the name was a piece of information he would file away and use later. "Adaze. I am Victor Mancini, and you saved the only thing in this world that I care about." I knew the name. Everyone in this city knew the name, even if they pretended not to. Mancini, the family that owned half the politicians and most of the police. The family that made people disappear when they became inconvenient. The family that no one crossed and lived to regret it. I had saved the daughter of the most dangerous man in the city. And now he was standing 3 feet away from me, blocking the only exit, looking at me like I was a puzzle he intended to solve. "My daughter has been asking about you," he said. "The woman who carried her through the rain. She calls you the angel." He paused. "She wants to meet you." I shook my head. "That's not a good idea." "Why not?" Because I am running from people who are almost as dangerous as you. Because if I let myself care about your daughter, I will only put her in more danger. Because I have learned through years of painful experience that attachment is a weakness I cannot afford. I said none of these things. I only said, I'm nobody, just a cleaner. There's nothing special about me. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. He placed it on the desk between us, a small white rectangle that felt like a grenade. Take it, he said. When you're ready to stop pretending, call me. He turned and walked out of the office without looking back. His footsteps faded down the hallway, and a moment later I heard the elevator chime. I stood there for a long time staring at that card. Then I finished cleaning the office, emptied the trash, and pushed my cart to the next room. I did not take the card, but I did not throw it away. The card sat on my bathroom sink for 2 weeks. Every morning I looked at it. Every night I looked at it. I told myself I would throw it away tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. Victor Mancini did not return to the building, but I felt his presence everywhere. In the security guards who suddenly knew my name, in the other cleaners who gave me strange looks like they knew something I did not, in the way the building manager started asking if I was comfortable, if I needed anything, if there was anything he could do to make my job easier. I was being watched, evaluated. I did not know for what purpose, and that uncertainty was worse than any direct threat. 3 weeks after our encounter, a woman appeared at my apartment. I came home from my shift to find her sitting on the steps outside my door. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair and sharp eyes and the kind of posture that suggested she knew exactly how to use the gun I was certain she had hidden somewhere on her body. "A dies," she said. Not a question. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs. "Who are you?" "My name is Lucia. I work for Mr. Mancini." She stood, brushing off her coat. "He would like to extend an invitation." "I'm not interested." "You haven't heard the invitation yet." "I don't need to hear it. Whatever he wants from me, the answer is no." She smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "Mr. Mancini said you would say that. He also said to tell you that his daughter has been having nightmares. Every night since the incident. She wakes up screaming about the cold, about being alone." The smile faded. "But she always says the angel will come. The angel will find her. She's been waiting for you." I felt something twist in my chest. I ignored it. "That's not my problem." "No," Lucia agreed. "It's not. But Mr. Mancini thought you might like to know." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a photograph. "He also wanted you to have this." She handed me the photograph and walked away without another word. I stood on the stairs holding a picture of a little girl with dark hair and serious eyes, sitting on a bed clutching a stuffed rabbit, looking at the camera like she was waiting for someone who was never going to come. The next morning, I called the number on the card. The car that picked me up was black and silent. The driver did not speak. We drove for nearly an hour, leaving the city behind, passing through suburbs and then countryside, until we turned onto a private road that wound through trees for another 10 minutes before the house appeared. It was not a house. It was a fortress. Stone and steel and glass rising from the landscape like a monument to power. There were men at the gate, men patrolling the grounds, men stationed at every entrance. I counted them automatically, noted their positions, assessed the security. Old habits. Hard to break. Sophia was waiting at the door. She was smaller than I remembered, though I had only carried her for 6 blocks in the rain. Her hair was neatly braided, and she wore a dress with small flowers on it, and she looked at me with those same serious eyes from the photograph. "You came," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Daddy said you would come. I wasn't sure. But you came." I did not know what to say. I had expected guards and questions and negotiations. I had not expected this small, solemn child looking at me like I was the answer to a prayer. "I came," I said. She reached out and took my hand. Her fingers were cold. "Will you stay?" Behind her, in the shadows of the entryway, I saw Victor watching. His face was unreadable. "For a little while," I said. Sophia led me through the house, showing me rooms and pointing out windows and telling me about her rabbit, Mr. Whiskers, who was her best friend, except he could not talk. So sometimes it got lonely. She did not let go of my hand. Her grip was fierce, desperate, the grip of a child who had learned that people could disappear. We ended up in her bedroom. It was large and well-furnished, but it felt empty somehow. Hollow. Like all the expensive things could not fill the space where warmth should have been. She introduced me to Mr. Whiskers with great ceremony. He was a worn, stuffed rabbit with one button eye and a patch on his stomach where he had been mended many times. I shook his paw and told him it was nice to meet him, and Sophia smiled for the first time. "Do you have bad dreams?" she asked. The question caught me off guard. "Sometimes. Me too. I dream about the cold, about the dark, about being alone." She hugged Mr. Whiskers tighter. "But then I remember the angel came. The angel found me." She looked up at me. "That was you. I'm not an angel. Daddy says angels don't have wings. They just look like people, but they come when you need them." She tilted her head. "Did someone send you to find me?" I thought about all the things I could say, all the logical explanations. Instead, I said, "I don't know, maybe." She nodded like this made perfect sense. "I think someone did. I think someone knew I was scared and sent you to help." She paused. "Will you help me again, if I get scared?" I should have said no. I should have explained that I was not the kind of person who helped, that I was running from things she could not understand, that getting attached to me would only end in pain. But she was looking at me with those serious eyes, and her hand was still in mine, and the word came out before I could stop it. Yes. Victor was waiting for me when I came downstairs. He was in the study, standing by the window, looking out at the grounds with the stillness of a man who was always calculating, always planning. "She likes you," he said without turning around. "She doesn't know me. She knows enough." He turned. His eyes were dark, unreadable. "I want to offer you a job." "What kind of job?" "Taking care of my daughter, being there when she needs someone, watching over her." He paused. "Living here." I laughed. It came out sharp, incredulous. "You want me to be her nanny?" "I want you to be whatever she needs you to be. A nanny, a protector, a friend." He took a step toward me. "I have staff. I have security. But none of them have what you have." "And what is that?" The willingness to act without knowing who she was, without expecting anything in return. He held my gaze. "That kind of loyalty cannot be purchased, but I am hoping it can be earned." I thought about my room above the laundromat, about the night shifts and the invisibility and the endless, exhausting work of staying unnoticed, about the years of running and hiding and never letting myself want anything. Then I thought about Sophia's hand in mine, about the way she had looked at me like I mattered. "I have conditions," I heard myself say. Victor nodded. "Name them." "I come and go as I please, no surveillance, no tracking. If I decide to leave, you let me leave." "Agreed." "You don't ask about my past. You don't have your people dig into where I came from." A pause. "Why not?" "Because my past is my business, and because if you dig, you might find things that put both of us in danger." He studied me for a long moment. I could see him calculating, weighing risks, deciding how much he was willing to trust. "Agreed," he finally said, "under one condition of my own." "Which is?" "If your past becomes a threat to my daughter, you tell me, immediately, before it becomes a problem." It was fair, more than fair, given what he was offering. "Agreed." He extended his hand. I took it. His grip was firm, his palm dry, and when our eyes met, I saw something in his that looked almost like respect. Welcome to the family, Adaze. I moved in the following week. I was given a suite of rooms on the second floor, more space than I had lived in for years. There was a sitting room and a bedroom and a bathroom with a tub I could have drowned in. There were clothes in the closet in my size. There was food in the kitchen whenever I wanted it. It felt like a trap, beautiful and comfortable and designed to make me forget that the bars were still there, invisible but real. But Sophia was happy. She dragged me from room to room, showing me her favourite hiding spots, introducing me to the staff, telling me stories about her mother who had died and her father who was always working, and the horses she wanted to ride but was not allowed to yet. "Do you like horses?" she asked. "I've never ridden one." Her eyes went wide. "Never. Not ever. Never. When I'm allowed to ride, I'll teach you. I'll be a very good teacher. Better than Daddy's teachers. They're mean." I found myself smiling. It felt strange on my face, unfamiliar. I'd like that. The days took on a rhythm. I woke early and checked on Sophia. I helped her get ready for school and rode with her in the car to the gates where guards I was learning to recognize by name escorted her the rest of the way. I picked her up in the afternoon and helped her with homework and listened to her stories and ate dinner with her in the kitchen because she said the dining room was too big and too quiet. Victor was rarely present. He came and went at odd hours, surrounded by men who spoke in low voices and fell silent when I approached. There were meetings behind closed doors and phone calls that ended abruptly when I walked into the room. I did not ask questions. It was not my place. But I watched. I listened. I learned. I learned that the Mancini empire extended far beyond what the newspapers reported. Shipping, construction, real estate, politics. There were legitimate businesses layered over illegitimate ones, a maze of companies and subsidiaries, and offshore accounts that would take a forensic accountant years to untangle. I learned that Victor was feared not because he was violent, but because he was patient. He did not rage or threaten or make scenes. He simply waited, watching, until the perfect moment to strike. And when he struck, it was without mercy. I learned that he had enemies. Men who wanted what he had built. Men who would use any weakness against him. Men who would see a daughter as leverage and a new woman in the house as an opportunity. I learned to be careful, to watch the shadows, to trust no one. 3 months into my employment, someone tried to take Sophia. We were at the supermarket, a small trip she had begged for because she wanted to buy flowers for her room. I had cleared it with security, had 2 guards trailing us at a distance, had mapped the exits before we left the car. None of it mattered. They came out of nowhere. 3 men moving fast, one of them reaching for Sophia, while the other 2 converged on me. I saw the guards go down out of the corner of my eye, saw the van idling at the curb, saw the way the crowd parted and looked away because they knew what they were seeing and wanted no part of it. I moved without thinking. The man reaching for Sophia did not expect me to fight back. He definitely did not expect me to fight back effectively. I broke his wrist before he could touch her, used his body as a shield against the second man, and had the third on the ground with a knee in his spine before the van doors could open. It was over in 30 seconds. Sophia was crying. The guards were stirring. People were starting to gather, phones out, sirens, in the distance. I grabbed Sophia and ran. We made it back to the estate in a car I took from one of the fallen guards. I did not stop to explain. I did not stop for anything. Victor was in the study when I burst through the door, Sophia in my arms, both of us shaking. His face went from calm to murderous in the space of a heartbeat. "What happened?" I told him, briefly, without emotion. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment, his hands gripping the edge of his desk, hard enough that his knuckles went white. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Is she hurt?" "No." "Where are the men who did this?" "One of them is still at the market. The other 2 drove away when they saw things were not going as planned." He nodded slowly. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something new in his eyes, something that had not been there before. "Where did you learn to do that?" I held his gaze. "I told you. My past is my business." "Your past just saved my daughter's life." He released the desk and straightened. "Again. I did not know what to say, so I said nothing. He crossed the room to where I stood, Sophia still in my arms. She was quiet now, her face buried in my neck, her small body trembling against mine. "Give her to me," he said. I transferred Sophia into his arms. She clung to him the way she had clung to me, and for a moment his face softened, became almost human. "Go clean up," he said. "We'll talk later." I left them there, father and daughter, and went to my room and stood in the shower until the water ran cold. Then I stood there some more. I had revealed too much. The way I had fought, the instincts I had shown, the training that should have been beaten out of me years ago, but had instead been sharpened by years of running. Victor would have questions. He would want answers I could not give. I should run. That was the smart thing, the safe thing. Pack my bag, take my savings, disappear before he could dig too deep. But Sophia's face kept appearing in my mind. The way she had looked at me after, like I was the only solid thing in a world that had just tried to snatch her away. The way she had clung to me, trusting me completely, believing I would keep her safe. I could not leave her. Not now. Maybe not ever. I was still in my room when Victor came to find me. He knocked first, which surprised me. Then he opened the door and stepped inside, and the room suddenly felt very small. "The men from the market," he said. "We found them." I waited. They were hired by an associate of mine, someone who thought my attention was elsewhere, someone who thought he saw an opportunity. Victor's voice was calm, almost pleasant. He was wrong. What happened to him? He no longer exists. I should have been horrified. I should have felt something at the casual admission of murder. But I had grown up in a world where people stopped existing all the time, and I had learned long ago that horror was a luxury I could not afford. "The men who came for Sophia," I said. "They knew our route. They knew we would be at the market. They knew about the guards." "Yes, which means someone inside told them." Victor's eyes flickered. It was the smallest reaction, but I caught it. "We are looking into that." "Looking into it is not good enough." Sophia almost... I stopped, took a breath. "She almost died because someone in your house sold her out. You need to find them. Now." For a long moment, Victor just looked at me. Then the corner of his mouth twitched, and I realized with shock that he was almost smiling. "You care about her," he said. It was not a question, so I did not answer. "Good." He turned toward the door, then paused. "I have not forgotten my promise. I have not dug into your past. But I am beginning to think your past is more interesting than I imagined. It's not. Liar." He said it without heat. "Get some rest, Addies. Tomorrow we begin your real training." He left before I could ask what he meant. The training started the next morning. Not combat training, I did not need that. Surveillance training, intelligence gathering, the art of reading a room and identifying threats before they became problems. Victor's head of security, a man named Marco, who had been with the family for 30 years, became my teacher. He was patient and thorough and completely uninterested in where I had learned the basics he was now building upon. "You have instincts," he told me. "Good ones. But instincts are not enough. You need to think, to plan, to see the whole board." I learned to see the whole board. I learned to identify every person in Sophia's orbit, to assess their loyalties, to recognize the subtle signs of betrayal before it happened. I learned the routes between the estate and her school, the vulnerabilities and the contingencies. I learned names and faces and relationships, building a mental map of the Mancini empire that grew more detailed every day. Victor watched my progress without comment, but I felt his attention, felt him observing me the way I observed everyone else, assessing, calculating, deciding what I was worth. The leak in his organization was found 3 weeks later. A driver who had been with the family for 5 years turned by Victor's competitor for a sum that probably seemed like a fortune until he understood what it would cost him. I did not ask what happened to the driver. I did not want to know. But Sophia stopped having nightmares about the market. And that was enough. Months passed. The seasons changed. I became something more than a caretaker and something less than family, occupying a space that had no name but felt increasingly permanent. Sophia attached herself to me with the fierce devotion of a child who had lost too much too young. She told me her secrets, showed me her drawings, asked me questions about life and death and why some people were mean and others were not. I answered as honestly as I could, which was sometimes not very honest at all. "Did your mommy die too?" she asked one afternoon. We were in the garden watching butterflies. She had asked the question casually, the way children ask about terrible things. "Yes. Do you miss her?" I thought about my mother, about the last time I had seen her standing in a doorway telling me to run and not look back. "Every day." Sophia nodded like this made sense. "I miss my mommy too, but Daddy says she's watching us from somewhere nice. Do you think that's true?" "I think it could be." "Good." She caught a butterfly on her finger, examined it with solemn attention, then let it go. "Because I think your mommy and my mommy are probably friends now. They can be friends and watch us together." Something caught in my throat. I turned away so she would not see my face. "I think you're right," I said. Victor found me in the garden that evening. Sophia had gone inside for dinner, and I was sitting on a bench watching the sun set behind the trees. He sat down beside me without asking permission. We stayed like that for a while, silent, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. "She told me about the butterflies," he said finally, "about your mother's being friends. She has a good imagination. She has a good heart." He paused. "She gets that from her mother, not from me." I did not know what to say, so I said nothing. "Elena was kind," he continued. "Genuinely kind, not the way people are kind when they want something. She saw the good in people. She believed everyone deserved a second chance." His voice was quiet, stripped of its usual control. "She believed that about me, even when I didn't deserve it." What happened to her? It was a question I had never asked, had not felt I had the right to ask, but something about the fading light and the quiet garden made the words come out anyway. "A car accident. 2 years ago. She was driving home from visiting her sister." He was silent for a moment. "Except it wasn't an accident. It was a message. From someone who wanted to remind me that I was not untouchable." "Did you find them?" "Yes." "What happened?" He turned to look at me, and his eyes were cold in a way I had not seen before. "They learned that I am not untouchable, but I am unforgettable." I held his gaze without flinching. I had seen that coldness before in other men, in other places. I knew what it meant. "Good," I said. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Or recognition. "You understand. I understand that some people do not deserve mercy. I understand that love makes you capable of terrible things." I looked away toward the darkening sky. "I understand more than you know." We sat in silence until the stars came out. The first time Victor kissed me was 4 months later. It happened in his study late at night, after a crisis that had kept us both awake for 48 hours. Someone had been skimming from one of his legitimate businesses, and the investigation had led to places he had not expected. I had helped where I could, applying the analytical skills Marco had taught me to ledgers and reports that told a story of betrayal. When it was over, when the traitor had been identified and the problem resolved, Victor poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed one to me. "You didn't have to stay," he said. "I know." "You could have gone to bed. Let me handle it." "I know." He studied me over the rim of his glass. "Then why didn't you?" "Because Sophia was asleep and safe. Because I had nowhere else to be. Because somewhere along the way his problems had become my problems, and I could not walk away from them any more than I could walk away from her." "Because I wanted to help," I said. He set down his glass. He crossed the room in 3 strides, and then his hands were on my face, and his mouth was on mine, and I was kissing him back with all the desperation I had kept locked away for months. It was not gentle. It was not tender. It was hunger and need and the release of something that had been building since the first time he looked at me with those dark, unreadable eyes. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. "This is a bad idea," I said. "I know." "Your world is dangerous. Your enemies would use me against you." "I know. I have a past that could destroy everything you've built." "I know." He traced his thumb across my cheekbone, a touch so gentle it made me ache. "Tell me to stop and I'll stop. Tell me you don't want this and I'll walk away right now and we'll never speak of it again." I should have told him to stop. I should have walked away, packed my bags, disappeared into the night before this became something I could not survive losing. But I was tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of being so afraid of loss that I refused to let myself want anything. "Don't stop," I said. He kissed me again, softer this time, slower, and something inside me that had been frozen for years began finally to thaw. We kept it secret what was growing between us. Not because we were ashamed, but because knowledge was a weapon, and we had too many enemies who would use any weapon they could find. But Sophia knew. Children always know. She smiled when she saw us together and made excuses to leave us alone, and once, memorably, asked if I was going to be her new mommy. I did not know how to answer that. Neither did Victor. "Would you want that?" I asked her, "if it were possible." She thought about it with the seriousness she brought to all important questions. "I think so. I can't have my real mommy back. Daddy says she's gone forever. But having another mommy who loves me would be nice." She looked up at me. "Do you love me?" "Yes." "Do you love Daddy?" The question hung in the air. I had not said the words to him, had not admitted them even to myself. But Sophia was looking at me with those serious eyes, waiting for the truth. "Yes," I said. "I do." She smiled, satisfied. "Then I think you should be my mommy. But only if you want to." I gathered her into my arms and held her tight. "I want to," I whispered. "More than anything." The past came for me on a Tuesday in October. I should have expected it. I had stayed too long, become too comfortable, allowed myself to believe that the new life I had built could survive the weight of the old one. I was wrong. The first sign was a car I did not recognize parked outside Sophia's school. Black sedan, tinted windows, no plates. I noted it and said nothing, but that evening I told Marco, and he doubled the security on the school routes. The second sign was a face in the crowd at the market. A man I had known in another life, watching me from across the square with the patience of a hunter who knows his prey is cornered. I did not go back to the market. The third sign was the letter. It arrived without postage, without return address, slipped under my door in the middle of the night. Inside was a single photograph. Me, years ago, standing next to a man I had tried very hard to forget. On the back was written, "He's coming." I should have run. That was what I had always done, what I had been trained to do. At the first sign of danger, you move. You do not stay to fight. You do not stay to protect. You save yourself, because no one else will. But running meant leaving Sophia. Running meant leaving Victor. Running meant losing everything I had finally allowed myself to want. I went to Victor instead. He was in his study, working late, as he often did. When I handed him the photograph, his face went very still. "Who is he?" he asked. "His name is Dominic Agbaje. He runs an organization based in Lagos. Drugs, weapons, human trafficking." I paused. "I was supposed to marry him." Victor looked at me. "Supposed to?" "My family owed his family a debt. I was the payment." The words came out flat, emotionless. "I ran the night before the wedding. I've been running ever since." "How long ago?" 4 years. He set down the photograph. "And he's been looking for you this whole time?" "Yes. He doesn't forgive insults. And what I did, running from a marriage to him, that was the worst insult possible." "What happens if he finds you?" I thought about the things I knew about Dominic, the things I had seen, The things I had heard whispered about in corners. He kills me, slowly, and anyone who stood between us. Victor was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was calm, almost conversational. How many men does he have? Hundreds, maybe more. Resources? Significant. Not as much as you, but enough. And he's here, in my city, looking for something that belongs to me. Something that belongs to me. The words should have bothered me. Instead, they made something warm uncurl in my chest. I should leave, I said. If I run now, I can draw him away from you, from Sophia. He doesn't know about... No, Victor. I said no. He stood and crossed to where I was standing. His hands settled on my shoulders, heavy and warm. You're not running. Not anymore. If I stay, he'll come here. He'll bring everything he has. Let him. Victor's eyes were cold, but not for me. For the man who had dared to threaten what was his. Let him bring his army. Let him bring his guns. Let him come to my city, to my house, and try to take what I have decided is mine. His grip tightened. I've been waiting for something worth fighting for. Now I have it. I stared at him. You don't understand. These people, my people, they don't fight fair. They don't follow rules. Neither do I. He kissed me then, hard and fierce, and when he pulled back, his eyes were blazing. You're not a debt to be paid, he said. You're not property to be claimed. You're mine because you chose to be, and I protect what's mine. For the first time in 4 years, I let myself believe I might survive this. The war came 3 weeks later. Victor had used the time well. He called in allies, fortified the estate, sent Sophia to a safe house upstate with guards. He trusted with his life. He prepared for battle with the same cold efficiency he brought to everything. I prepared too. The training I had buried for years rose back to the surface, muscle memory and reflexes that had never really faded. Marco watched me practice and said nothing, but I saw the respect in his eyes. They came at night. Dominic had never been subtle. The first wave hit the outer gates. The second wave came from the east, through terrain everyone had assured Dominic was impassable. Victor's men held them off, but barely. Bodies fell on both sides and the sound of gunfire shattered the quiet of the countryside. I found Dominic in the study. He had gotten past the defences somehow, slipped through while his men died as a distraction. He was standing by the window looking out at the chaos he had created, and when I walked in, he smiled. "Adaeze," he said. "You've made me wait a very long time." He looked the same as I remembered. Tall, handsome, in a cold and reptilian way, eyes that held nothing human behind them. "You should have stayed in Lagos," I said. "And missed this?" He gestured at the window, at the battle raging outside. "You cost me everything a day's, my reputation, my honour, the respect of my family." He turned to face me fully. "Did you think I would ever stop looking?" "I hoped." He laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Hope? That's sweet. That's very sweet." He took a step toward me. "I'm going to take you home now. And then I'm going to spend a very long time teaching you what happens to women who run." I did not move. "No." "No?" Another step. "You don't get to say no, Adaeze. You never did. You're mine. You've been mine since the day your father sold you to pay his debts." "My father is dead. His debts died with him." I held my ground. "And I belong to no one but myself." He moved fast, faster than I expected. His hand closed around my throat, and he slammed me against the wall hard enough to make my vision blur. "You think that? Man can protect you," he hissed. "You think this little empire of his means anything? I will burn it all down. I will kill everyone you love, and then I will take you home and make you wish you had never been born." I looked into his eyes and saw nothing but emptiness, nothing but hunger and rage and the absolute certainty that he was entitled to whatever he wanted. "You're wrong," I said. And then I drove the knife I had hidden in my sleeve through his ribs. He staggered back, eyes wide with shock, Blood blossomed across his shirt, and he looked down at it like he could not understand what had happened. I told you, I said, I belong to no one but myself. He fell. He did not get up. I stood there for a long moment looking at the body of the man who had haunted my nightmares for 4 years. Then I stepped over him and walked out of the study to find Victor. The battle ended an hour later. Without their leader, Dominic's men fell apart, retreating into the night, leaving their dead behind. Victor's people had taken losses too, but they had held. They had won. Victor found me on the porch, watching the sun rise over the grounds that were now scarred with violence. He sat down beside me without speaking. We stayed like that for a long time, watching the light spread across the sky. It's over, I said finally. Yes, he's dead. I know. Marco told me. Victor paused. You could have let me handle it. No. I turned to look at him. He was mine to finish. He's been mine to finish for 4 years. Victor nodded slowly. How do you feel? I thought about it. I expected to feel guilt or horror or the weight of having taken a life. Instead, I felt nothing but a vast, quiet peace. Free, I said. I feel free. He reached over and took my hand. We sat there together, watching the sun rise, and for the first time in my life, I did not think about running. Sophia came home 2 days later. She ran into my arms and held me so tight I thought she might never let go. I was scared, she whispered. I was scared you wouldn't be here when I got back. I'm here, I said. I'm not going anywhere. She pulled back to look at me with those serious eyes. Promise? Promise. She smiled, that bright, transformative smile that made her look like the child she was supposed to be, and dragged me inside to show me the drawings she had made at the safe house. That evening, Victor found me in Sophia's room watching her sleep. She missed you, he said. I missed her too. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him at my back. Stay. I'm not going anywhere. No. He turned me to face him. I mean stay. Forever be my wife. Be Sophia's mother, be part of this family, not just an employee, not just a guest. Stay. I looked up at him. His face was serious, intent, the face of a man who knew what he wanted and was no longer willing to wait for it. Victor, I know it's not conventional. I know my world is dangerous. I know there will always be enemies, always be threats, always be risks. He cupped my face in his hands. But I also know that I love you. I love your courage and your strength, and the way you look at my daughter like she's the most important thing in the world. I love that you stayed when you could have run. I love that you fought beside me instead of letting me fight alone. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was rough. I love you, Adaz. Stay with me. Let me spend the rest of my life proving I was worth staying for. I thought about all the reasons to say no, all the complications and dangers and ways this could end in pain. Then I thought about Sophia's smile, about the peace I felt watching the sunrise after the battle, about the way Victor looked at me like I was something precious instead of something to be used. Yes, I said, I'll stay. He kissed me, soft and slow, and I felt the last of my walls crumble into dust. We married in the spring. Small ceremony, just us, Sophia, and the people we trusted most. Sophia was flower girl, scattering petals with more enthusiasm than accuracy, and Mr. Whiskers sat on a velvet cushion as ring bearer. I wore a simple dress the colour of ivory. Victor wore a dark suit and a smile I had never seen before, open, unguarded, happy. When he said I do, his voice was steady. When I said the same, mine cracked on the words, but I got them out. Afterward, there was dinner and dancing, and Sophia staying up past her bedtime because some occasions deserved exceptions. Victor held me close during the slow songs, and I rested my head on his shoulder. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely, entirely safe. Thank you, I murmured. For what? For finding me, for waiting, for not letting me run. I pulled back to look at him, for giving me a home. He kissed me softly. You gave me one first. You saved my daughter. You saved me. His arms tightened around me. The least I could do was return the favor. We swayed, together in the garden where I had once sat alone watching butterflies, and I let myself believe that this was real, that it would last, that I had finally found the place where I belonged. The years that followed were not easy. Victor's world was dangerous, and danger does not disappear because you wish it would. There were threats and crises and long nights waiting for him to come home. But there was also this: mornings in the garden with Sophia, helping her care for the horse she finally got on her 8th birthday. Evenings in the study with Victor, reading side by side while the fire crackled. Quiet moments stolen in hallways and doorways, a touch, a look, a reminder that we had chosen this. There was also love. Not the kind in fairy tales, easy and uncomplicated. The kind that was hard-won and hard-kept, that required work and patience and forgiveness. The kind that lasted. On the day of Sophia's 10th birthday, I woke before dawn. Victor was still asleep beside me, his face peaceful in the grey light. I slipped out of bed and went to the window, looking out at the grounds that had become my home. 10 years ago, I had been a waitress in a diner, invisible and alone, certain that I would spend the rest of my life running. Now I was a wife, a mother, part of a family that had claimed me as fiercely as I had claimed them. Victor stirred behind me. You're thinking too loudly, I smiled. Sorry. He crossed the room and wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. What were you thinking about? Everything. Nothing. I leaned back into him. How different things are. Any regrets? I thought about it. The running, the hiding. The night in the alley when I had picked up a dying child without knowing it would change everything. No, I said. Not one. He pressed a kiss to my hair. Good. Now come back to bed. It's too early for philosophy. I laughed and let him pull me back. Through the window, the first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold. It was going to be a beautiful day.